In music, arts, and society in general, there's been an awful lot of pretentiousness and what I call cultural fascism, with the fashion police, aided by the academic seats of learning, trying to impose straitjackets on people's thinking and their creativity. In my videos on Mozart and Beethoven, I stressed the importance of intuition and organic creativity in producing works of true originality that connect with all the senses. Here is what I said in my video on Beethoven. Beethoven was essentially an organic or intuitive composer rather than someone who was a slave to theory or to any mathematical formula. Now, this is not something that you can prove on paper. It is something that you either recognize or you don't, and the way you recognize it is through all your senses. There are many modern composers who have made a name for themselves by closing down some of their senses and relying on a very mathematical and theoretical approach to their composing. But none of them, in my less than humble opinion, comes anywhere near close to creating great works that resonate with anyone beyond a small coterie of mutual admirers, who, like the citizens in the story of the emperor's clothing, thought they would be considered shallow or stupid if they did not appreciate such music. Organic or intuitive composers became increasingly pushed aside from the middle of the 20th century, when the age of the emperor's clothing syndrome really started to take flight, in music as well as in the other arts. In music, it was led by the followers of Arnold Schoenberg, who had a big influence on academic musicologists with his introduction of a 12-tone musical scale, which ultimately led to the creation of atonal music. Most people found jarring and alienating, though some Schoenberg apologists say that his theories were misinterpreted by many of his followers. I believe that a lot of people saw Schoenberg's theories as a chance to carve out a nice little academic niche for themselves, building on his theories and becoming the high priests of the musical world. Their main interest was in grabbing a piece of academic territory for themselves and defending it against all who did not conform to their theories. These academics were lost without something to theorize about. But being weighed down with too much theory can actually kill music at the moment of its conception. Artists and composers who relied more on real talent and organic creativity were dismissed as messy, emotional creatures who should not be allowed to bring feelings and emotions into their work. God forbid. No, modern art and music, the high priests proclaimed, needed to be free of all feeling and emotion and rely purely on their intellect and on academic theory. Among other things, this led to a prominent but now forgotten British composer declaring that you could not really appreciate his music unless you read the score. My response to this, and to others of his kind, was, well, if dreadful music can only be appreciated by reading the score, why not write a novel instead? One of the 20th century composers favoured by the academic intelligentsia and their circle of mutual admirers is Olivier-Messeian, whom I recently described as someone whose music sounds like he is stuck in a long, dark passage in an abandoned mine shaft, going nowhere and offering no light. Here is a snatch of one of his works. I think that's enough of that. Sounds to me like three cats trying to fight their way out of a cardboard box. Now, another 20th century composer, much favoured by the cultural fashionista, is John Adams, composer of Nixon in China. Here is a snippet of that opera. Use.
has a kind of mystery, has a kind of mystery.
News, 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 news has a kind of mystery. I mean, what kind of nonsense is that? The only mystery here is how anybody can take that tripe seriously. The lyrics by Maya Angelou are as banal as the music itself. But the real prize for the most pretentious bit of nonsense ever created goes to John Cage and his 4.33 minutes of silence.
Cage wrote 4 minutes 33 as a piece in 3 movements where the performer does absolutely nothing, allowing the audience to absorb the sounds around them. Tonight the piece is being presented in a full orchestral version conducted by Lawrence Foster. He's going to give a downbeat to each of the 3 movements. He'll turn pages when he needs to, and of course the orchestra will remain silent, we hope, throughout the piece.
Sorry. Anyway, isn't that the most ridiculous nonsense you have ever heard? But now, listen to this. What do you think of that? Those 10 seconds of silence were composed by me. Did you notice how much more depth it had than John Cage's piece, and how much more intellectually satisfying it was, how much more eloquent it was? You see, if you're going to compose silent music, you should at least do it with a little bit of talent, like mine. The Emperor's Clothing Syndrome was also running rampant in the fine arts, where people of limited artistic talent like Andy Warhol were idolized because he gave the high priests of the art world something to chatter about and to build new theories around. And what about the Tate Museum in London paying a small fortune for a pile of bricks? Unfortunately, the people who support these posers get themselves elected to prominence in academic fields in places like the Metropolitan Opera House and the Museums of Modern Art, who spend fortunes on subsidizing their work. Unfortunately, this kind of thing runs rampant throughout society and not just in the arts. Academies of learning purport to promote knowledge and understanding, and in many cases this is exactly what they do. But in many instances, the high priests of the academic world are much more interested in promoting their own agenda and protecting their territory rather than promoting learning. Like the high priests of the Middle Ages who used Latin as a way of maintaining a form of elitism over the common people, so the modern-day high priests of the academic and cultural world practice a new form of elitism by promoting and subscribing to things that only they pretend to understand and appreciate. I think there are too many artists and composers who try just a little too hard to be original and who like to think of themselves as being at the, quote, cutting edge, close quote, of where it's at. But too often the term cutting edge can be used as a pathetic excuse for pretentious dross that exhibits very little talent whatsoever. Many of the modern high priests have no real interest in promoting originality or individual thinking because it is not something that they can control. And this kind of thing spills out into many areas of society, including, of course, and most of all, perhaps, politics. But I think the time has come to stage a protest against those who want to put a straitjacket on creativity and individual thinking. The revolution starts here.